Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Now in today's video, we are going to look at how to set up Jenkins Docker-in-Docker container on macOS. So if I run the command sw_verse, see that I'm currently working on my macOS terminal. First, we want to be able to use our Jenkins container to build Docker images. So that is going to create a Docker inside of a Docker, or a container inside of a running container. In that case, you can just use the normal Docker run Jenkins image. So you need to modify how you run the Jenkins container a little bit in order to allow you to build jobs with it, especially if you are building a Docker image. So first things first is to make sure that Docker is installed. Now, because I'm using Mac, on the MacBook, if you want to install Docker, you have to install Docker Desktop. And I have Docker Desktop installed already here. So I'm just going to open it. Okay, so you can see Docker has started, but it's running in the background. So this is a Docker Desktop. All right, now once this is open, if you do Docker version on your terminal, you should get a version of Docker installed. Now, if you don't know how to install this, go to your browser, install Docker. Go in here. Unless you are running a Linux system, you have to install Docker Engine for macOS or Windows through Docker Desktop. For Linux, you can install both the engine or the Docker Desktop. But for Windows and Mac, this is your only option. When you click here, this should give you the commands to install Docker Desktop. This is it here. Choose your system and then install it. Okay, so that's how you will install it. I have it installed already, so I can exit this. So clear the screen. Next, let's go to our GitHub repo. I've prepared a simple GitHub repository here with an application, a Node.js app, which is going to output hello world, welcome to Icon YouTube channel. And it's listening on port 3000. And then there's a Docker file here that will build the Docker image of the Node.js app using the base Node Alpine image, setting the working directory /app, copying the package files, installing npm dependencies. And then we'll copy the application files, expose it on port 3000, and this is a command to start the app. Let's go to the root of our GitHub repo. And then I'm going to create a new branch. The new branch, I'll call it Mac, create Mac branch from main. So this is just going to create a new branch, Mac. All right, so this is the branch that I'm going to use for this project. So I'm going to clone this repository. So go to code and copy this. In here, there's nothing. So git clone. Here's the link you copied. That should copy everything here. So ls cd into this repo. And this is the content of our repository. Now let's go through these files. So from here up to the Docker file, the same commands as we have on the main branch. Now what this Docker file does is to build a Docker image out of this application app.js. And the Docker file is as follows. It uses the Alpine node image as our base image. And then it sets a working directory /app, copy the package files, installs the npm dependencies, and then we'll copy the app or everything else in there. And then we'll expose the application on port 3000. And then this is the command to run the application. But before we use those Docker file, I have another directory here called custom Jenkins, and that also contains a Docker file. So there are two Docker files, one inside the custom Jenkins, one is inside the root of our repository. Let's check this one out. So this is a bit different. What this does is it takes the image of Jenkins LTS long-term support as our base image, sets user as root, and then it will run this shell commands to install Docker on this container. Once that is done, we will configure Docker to run as a non-root user by adding Jenkins to the Docker group. Then after that, we will enable Docker-in-Docker or DinD, which is using these commands, creating a directory and setting it up as a volume. So I'm going to build using this particular Docker file to get an image, and that image that we have will be our Jenkins image. So it's basically taking the original Jenkins image and patching it by installing Docker, enabling Docker-in-Docker, and then using that for your Jenkins jobs. Right, so on my terminal, I'll cd into custom_Jenkins, and it has the Docker file inside of it. This Docker file is the same as this Docker file here. So I'll run using docker build -t, and I'm gonna call this Jenkins_patch. And we are building it inside the current directory since I've already cd into the Jenkins directory. Press enter. Okay, so the build is done. Let's clear the screen here. And when I do Docker images, you should see the image that we just built called Jenkins patch. So the next thing that we're going to do is to run this image to have a Jenkins container up. And for that, I have this command here that I'm going to run. So this is going to run the Jenkins patch, which is this image. We are calling our container Jenkins DinD Mac. We're running it in privilege mode. We are mounting port 8080 on our local host to port 8080 of the container, and then port 50,000 for any Jenkins agents. Then we will mount the Docker socket on our local host to that of the container, and then the Jenkins home on our local host to that of the container. Press enter, and that should start your container. So when you do Docker PS, this is our Jenkins DinD Mac, which is exactly this container we just created. We are going to access this on our browser. So when I do 000:8080, I can use this to view on my browser, or you can use localhost. So it's either you do localhost:8080 or you use the 000:8080. Either way is still fine. Let's use the 00. Okay. For the initial password, you're gonna do Docker logs, the container name, and this is the initial password. Copy it. Come in here and paste it. Continue. Install suggested plugins. Then give it some username. Let's just give it an admin. Save and continue. Save and finish. Start using Jenkins. So Jenkins is ready here. Okay, so we can clear the screen. And with this our container, go to plus new item. We're gonna call this Jenkins DinD Mac. This is going to be a pipeline. Scroll down and you should see pipeline script. Now I don't want to use a Jenkins file, so I will just paste the pipeline script in here. If you want to do Jenkins file, that's fine. Go to the repository here and create a Jenkins file. But I'm just going to paste the script in here. So a script is going to look something like this. You have a pipeline, agents. The first stage is GitHub checkout, and the second stage is the Docker build. Now I've already added the Docker build step here. So docker.build, give it some name, and then a tag, which is latest. For the GitHub checkout, I'm going to use a pipeline syntax. So click on this. We'll open another page, go to Git. Repository URL. So here, let's go to our root. Go to code. Copy this. And then paste the URL here. The branch, don't forget we are working on the branch Mac. So the branch here should be Mac. Credential, we don't have any credential yet. So click add Jenkins. Username with password. All right, our GitHub repo username is iQuantC. So this should be iQuantC. And for the password, you have to go to settings. I'm gonna open this in a new tab. Settings, go down to developer settings. Personal access token classic. Generate a new token classic. And we will call this Jenkins DinD Mac token. Let's make it 7 days. Repo. Admin repo hook. You can select more if you want to. I'll just leave it like that. Generate. So this is the token. Copy this. Go to your pipeline syntax and paste this here as your password. And then for the ID, I'm going to use the exact same name I gave it earlier. Let's refresh this. And this is the name I gave it. Give it Jenkins DinD Mac token. Add. And then you can click here and select it. All right. Generates pipeline script. So this is the script for checking out our code. Copy this. Go to the Jenkins here. Paste it in here. So you have our checkout. You have our Docker ready. Apply and save. But because we want to do Docker build, we need to install some plugins. So I'm going to use the other page here. Go to dashboard, manage Jenkins, plugins, available, and install Docker plugin. Going to install Docker and Docker pipeline. Install. Okay, so installation is done. Okay, next, go to manage Jenkins, go to tools, scroll all the way down to Docker installations, and we will call this Docker, and we will install it automatically with the installer from docker.com. Apply and save. We can go to our pipeline job and hit build now. Okay, so you can see it's a success. Let's check the console output. So the first stage, of course, was the Git checkout. That was successful. And then this is the Docker build stage. And that was also a success. We end up with the image Mac DinD :latest, which is exactly what we had in our script earlier. Go to configure. This is the name we gave it. So that's how you can use Jenkins Docker-in-Docker on macOS. Thank you for joining me on this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. And I'll see you on the next one.